In my experience, it seems that a lot of what parenting a 12-month-old baby, as I get to do, is about is trying to figure out just what is going on in her little mind. I will say, though, some things are a lot clearer than they were a few months ago. She's starting to find her voice. She's got no down pat. But was that a wave or a request for milk? It's hard to say a lot of the time. I want to read intention into what she's doing, but how much is real and how much is just being hopeful? A few months ago, I had to go away overnight for a meeting, and I called my wife Kelly the next morning to say hi. She put me on speaker while she fed our baby Andy breakfast. As Andy babbled in the background, we both clearly heard her say, "Mama." It felt like amidst all that she has to learn, she knew it was me just from my voice. I can't tell you how much it warmed my faraway heart to feel like she knew it was me, she knew it was my voice, and called me Mama for the first time far away. It's amazing to learn how much babies pick up from the voices of their parents. For example, did you know that babies not only babble, but also even cry differently based on the language that they are exposed to in early life? Who knew that even baby babble could have an accent? However, before I go on too much about the beauty of motherhood, we need to pause. Well, I certainly could gush on for 15 minutes or probably much longer about how wonderful parenting is, at least in my personal experience. That's not really what we're here to do. And as Pastor Jim already alluded to this morning, Mother's Day is tricky. It's one of those days that I'm never totally sure how to mark in church. It's not a Christian holiday, and while it has so much meaning and spirituality for sure, there's also need for nuance. At the same time, it would feel totally wrong to ignore mothering today and further marginalize the critical but often unappreciated work of caregiving, especially as is done by women, caring work that can and does mirror God's nurturing love for us all. So, motherhood is complex. If today is simply joyful for you, I think we all sincerely appreciate that and celebrate that. But while some of us have had wonderful experiences of our mothers and mothering, others, even here in this room, have struggled. Some of us today are perhaps, even with the photos we see on the table, grieving mothers who have died. Others perhaps are grieving mothers we never had. Some of us had challenging expectations of and for motherhood placed on us. Motherhood is gendered, and so just as many of us have complex relationships to gender, so too mothering. Some of us may have wanted to be mothers, but struggled or could not be, or maybe we are mothers, but it's still complicated. We may have children who have grown and moved. Some of us may, more than just moved away, have children we are estranged from, or children lost to addiction, accidents, so many other tragedies. There are also stepmothers, adoptive mothers, queer mothers, foster mothers, surrogate mothers, grandmothers. And sometimes this is just all wonderful and beautiful, and sometimes it's also hard. We also know that many of us have been mothered by people other than our parents through relationships that go beyond what Hallmark offers cards for, but are so real nonetheless. The list of complexities goes on. Needless to say, we all feel a little differently today. Necessary to say, whatever feelings we have, these feelings are holy. God knows our complexity and meets us there right in the thick of it. God hears and knows our voices, our cries, our celebrations, and our yearnings. And beyond our personal and individual experiences, motherhood and mothering has been glorified, imposed, dismissed, and denied by society and many other institutions. But still, as I said, we do want to make sure that the often unglamorous, unseen, unpaid care work of parenting is honored. Like shepherding, motherhood can be similarly smelly and demanding. a 24/7 commitment that is always changing and bringing new challenges with each new season, each child unique, each journey its own. It's important that we don't ignore Mother's Day the way that the less cute parts of motherhood are often overlooked. More complexity also comes from the Bible and church traditions. Jesus was not a parent that we know of. His own parentage was complex, with Mary, Joseph, and God all playing roles. Mary, while celebrated at Christmas, is very much overshadowed by her son, and sometimes, like many other women, primarily known by her relationship to a man and not as a person in her own right. Coming to Jesus, he acknowledged that his teachings might create conflict in families and even turn children and parents against one another. We know that religious difference can still cause family strife today, not to mention political differences and so much more. Yet Jesus assured his followers that they would create new families, new communities, as a place to land, even when biological families might reject them. Jesus' family of followers was, in many ways, like something we might call chosen family today. In communion and the community of the church, Jesus invites us into a new family, a church family that transcends time and place, gender and race, biological and legal status. Over and beyond simply the nuclear family, we are taught to create family through the common meal we share, in serving and being served and knit into one body. I appreciate in today's scripture reading that we hear Jesus resisting some labels and saying instead what he does is what matters most. I think that's in some ways a great way to think about family, that the labels matter less than the love. We know family not by what it is called or named primarily, but what it does, the love it shows. In the time of the early church, Paul encouraged people not to get married or have children or become parents because it was assumed Jesus was coming back right away. So we see in some church traditions, following in that, they have not allowed leaders to get married or have families. And at the same time, in other religious traditions, being a parent has been nearly expected of leaders, almost required. In some cases, pastors' wives have been expected to be an unpaid extra set of hands, part of the package, mother to the whole church. Related to this, we can see how motherhood has always been political and has in recent months become even more so. I don't need to restate the offensive words of current political leaders who believe women need to get out of the workplace and back into more traditional, exclusively mothering roles. It gets far worse when we remember how race and class come into the argument, when it is fears of non-white immigrants having more children that in the past and now again today are motivating these calls for certain more privileged white women to have children. We hear these voices and we know what a limited, racist, and instrumentalized view of motherhood they come from. And then with the issues of abortion access and birth control and fertility further complicate the picture of motherhood in our time. So all that complexity, all that being said, let's ask what voices we can hear from Scripture today. We hear that people were confused about who Jesus was. They wanted a label, they wanted to be able to categorize him, they wanted a definitive answer if he was the Messiah that they were waiting for or not. Jesus does not give them a straight answer exactly, but says, look at the evidence. Rather than looking and fixating so much on a label, listen for liberation. He compares himself to the good shepherd, protective shepherd we hear about in the 23rd Psalm and elsewhere, and he says the proof is in the pudding. Those who are truly his followers trust him, they hear his voice, they know what is good and true, and they act on that truth by following, being part of his chosen family. Jesus says that the things that he does should be more than enough evidence. Listen for liberation, not labels. We might not, and I certainly do not, love the binary that is set up in the text between the saved and the lost, but I think the point for us today is one that Jesus often makes. Look to the fruit. to determine the worth of the tree. Look to the evidence and the impact and follow what is good and just and loving. Categories and rules and commandments are meant to serve, not to become ends in and of themselves. Listen, and if you hear something life-giving and life-saving, follow along. Join in the family. You shouldn't need a label. You should be able to use your own mind and judge based on the outcome. And to me, this approach seems helpful. The label of mother can sometimes limit our imagination, but we can and should celebrate wherever and whenever self-giving and self-affirming love is found. We should listen to and follow advice that is good, not listen to parents or politicians or others just because they said so. Judging by their fruits, heeding the voice that is good also makes me think about our current political moment. Just because some politicians might say they are pro-mother or pro-family does not necessarily mean that they are. We need to look deeper and ask what it is they are actually supporting. We know that right now, mothers and parents of all gender identities need support, paid parental leave, affordable quality childcare, the ability to have adequate time and resources and choices to be able to spend time with their kids, the right not to be separated at a border or by economic necessity from their offspring. Mothering is political and it is really hard work. And the isolated nuclear family is not a particularly great model for anyone, probably mothers especially. In this Asian American Heritage Month, I want to especially lift up the struggles of Asian Americans and especially those with Filipino heritage. I've shared with some of you that my wife and I served with the National Council of Churches of the Philippines, and there we learned about their labor export policies that send many mothers halfway across the world to care for other children as nannies and domestic workers and in similar roles like we heard in the news clip today. These women, many of whom, as I said, are mothers, are often far away from their own kids and then need their mothers and sisters and friends to step in. Now, I'm certainly not condemning anyone who hires a nanny or other domestic worker, nor am I criticizing anyone for traveling far away from their kids for work or any other reason. However, I do think we need to ask more structural questions about these practices and the policies and how to make them safer, especially raising the vulnerability, as we heard, of many women who have little protection and still few rights, especially in states other than California. And these issues are especially critical if they live in their employers' homes and if they have desperate need for their income and few other options. What can we do to ensure that everyone has options and that no one, not the parents who are employing nannies and domestic workers, nor the domestic workers themselves, are constrained by economic necessity or anything else? So, where can we find a life-giving word, a prophetic voice for mothers and others today? Where can we find the kind of shepherd that Jesus speaks of, one who gives life in all of its fullness? We've heard today that actions speak louder than words, and we know that parents and families and many of us are hungry for good fruit, works that can show God's nature and testify to God's love. I know in my first year of parenting, I have tasted good fruit, even as I have known some of the struggles of the way parenting exists in our culture and economy. I've benefited so much from the support and advocacy of others. Every meal on our meal train, every registry gift, every offer of help, every knowing smile in church when baby Andy has cried out always during a particularly poignant moment in a sermon. If you've offered care to me or any parent or child in your life, thank you, truly. Each offer of support, voice of encouragement, each of these blessings of reaching beyond the constraints of the nuclear family to say, we are your village, we are your chosen family, they matter. I've also been blessed by organizations and advocacy work, organizations like Our Family Coalition, which supports LGBT families in the Bay Area. I've been blessed indirectly with the work of IVF researchers and those who have advocated for parental leave and parental rights in the workplace and family tax credits. The list goes on. And beyond my own experience, I'm deeply grateful for all who support parents through nonprofits, government, churches, those advocating for the rights of domestic workers and others in this arena. We know that this work is good fruit, it is loving, and it is just a foretaste of the kingdom to come, where someday the work and the joy of child rearing will be shared even more widely, such that the separations between my family and yours, my responsibility and yours will fade into a fabric of shared communal love for all. Where maybe one day babies will respond to many voices as familiar and be trusted and known, and that no mother will have to hear the voice of judgment or condemnation, her own or anyone else's. In the Eastern Orthodox Christian tradition, Mary, as the mother of Jesus, is often referred to as Theotokos. This term is translated as God-bearer. Now, I used to not really like this term so much because it sort of suggested to me that Mary's identity was just limited to being a vessel for Jesus, being God-bearing in that moment, bearing God's child. But as I was reflecting this week, I wondered if there's a more expansive interpretation, that she bore God within her in ways other than simply the act of giving birth to Jesus alone. That she was a child of God, made in God's image, not separated from her role as Jesus' mother, but not limited to that either. Now, maybe this term wasn't intended that way, but maybe it was. And maybe our interpretation of it can bear good fruit if we don't limit Mary or any person just to their role as a parent, but also don't hide or minimize or devalue that role either. It's messy and complicated, like many things today, but I think we can know when a voice is good. Today, we know our voices are needed more than ever. In this time when freedom of speech is questioned, when bodily autonomy is limited and denied, women's rights rolled back, and the ability to honor diversity, equity, and inclusion is revoked. It can be hard to know what to do or what to say, but we can trust that there is a good shepherd guiding us safely through this uncharted wilderness. There is a voice that is leading us to what is right. The works that we do matter not only to us, but they also testify to the goodness of God. Our good works can be a voice of hope and assurance to those feeling utterly alone right now. The words we say matter because they can be the voice of compassion, guiding others to fullness and flourishing. God's shepherding love is like that of a strong, fierce, wise mother. It is a love that seeks out the one that is lost, even when there are 99 or more competing demands. God's love is a love that finds green pastures of nourishment, even in times of disaster and drought. It is a God-bearing love that bears God in all the ways, giving birth to new life in every shape and form, both literal and metaphorical. This shepherding, mothering care bears good fruit and resists any push to be limited or labeled. It is its own evidence. The voice of God as shepherd calls us forward and will never lead us astray. No matter what you may be facing this day, I know and I trust that God's voice is leading you to places of rest and restoration, and in this season of Easter, yet more resurrection still. May it be so.